Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about the transition to the medical device regulation, which was just barely published. And um, in fact, Gunter and I couldn't even find it in the official journal yet, so but I'm still told it was published on the 5th. So we're going to talk a bit about that. We'll also talk a bit about how an electronic quality management system can help with that transition. So for myself, I'll give a little bit of background. I've actually been in private industry most all of my life. Worked in a dental manufacturing company. So there we had both pharmaceuticals and medical devices. I worked there to bring all of the products up to FDA compliance, and then also work with our distributors worldwide to get the products into various countries around the world. I went from there to a X-ray company where we manufactured X-ray tubes, X-ray components, and systems for oncology treatment. And I took an early retirement package from there and started working with UL the next day. I was a customer of UL's and I really enjoyed the company, enjoyed working with them, and so as soon as I was available, I went to work for them. So I've been working with clients worldwide and helping with regulatory compliance issues. And Gunter, if you'll give us a bit on you.
Yeah. I'm for my education a dental technician, and I worked also in a lot of some dental companies for developing dental stuff for laboratories, or as well as dental implants the last years. And I changed to MDR, that's a medical device registration support. And in 2010 and 2011, this company was sold by UL, and since this time I'm consulting for UL, and we are helping, supporting all medical device manufacturers, mostly in Europe, by getting the registration and the CE mark. So mostly clinical evaluations, biological evaluations, risk management, and so on.
Okay, and I did want to mention while I'm here that while I was doing all those other things, I also went to law school and became an attorney. So that's what the ESQ is. I don't know if that's a recognized designation other than in the US, but and I also wanted to mention that UL just completed a couple of weeks ago acquisition of the Emergo group. So they are now a UL company, and we're doing a lot of the integration work with them at this time. So our objectives for this session is then to help understand the basic medical device regulation requirements, present some methods to think about for that transition to the regulation, and then a bit of how the EMQS can help with organizing that. As you are aware, probably the medical device regulation is much more comprehensive than the medical device directive was. 28 pages of preamble alone. Now, as an attorney, preambles are very important to us. It tells us a lot about what the thinking is of the regulators, what the expectations are, and how the regulation will be enforced. So it has 10 chapters. There's multiple articles per chapter, 16 annexes, 306 pages of reading delight. There is a formal procedure to translate the regulation into the EU members. We're not 100% sure yet how the Brexit activities are going to be affected, but for right now they're telling us that it'll be the same. So timeline, just a brief idea, and I created this timeline before I knew when the actual publication took place, but nevertheless you'll see that it's about accurate. All the notified bodies have to be redesignated under the medical device regulation, which means there's going to be fewer of them, as there's a lot more intensive requirements for notified bodies. The first CE certificates will be issued sometime after all of that redesignation process goes on. There is a 3-year transition period for applying the regulation into companies, and so after that 3-year period there will be no more CE certificates issued under the medical device directive. So business applications, a lot of issues in compliance timelines and planning. There will be a significant amount of reclassification and upclassification of products that'll be going on. There will be a lot of technical file revisions that are going to have to take place. So technical files are going to need to be updated. As I mentioned, reduce notified body capacity. It will be important to have visits with your notified bodies and make sure that they are going to be able to handle your work and schedule it going forward. So if you don't have a real good solid notified body now, I really recommend you look into that. Much more increased requirements in vigilance and post-market surveillance. There is now a requirement for unique device identification under the regulation. So as you may be aware, in the US, we've been implementing a UDI requirement for the last 3 years or so. The Class 1 products in the US are now under the implementation time. So by September of 2018, pretty much every device in the US that does not have an exemption will be under the UDI requirements. So the same sort of thing's going to happen here in Europe. There's going to be a staged implementation of the UDI requirements, and it's an area that every company is going to have to take a look at and see what they need to do to comply. And we have some significant experience from working with clients for the US, so we're available to help out there. UNIMED will be the database where information about devices will be stored, just like in the US under the Global Unique Device Identification Database. So there will be information in there about all those devices on the marketplace. And there will be a lot of increased training requirements. You've heard today about the benefits that Master Control is going to have in their training module, and opportunity to really put some training information in place that can be rolled out to your employees in a proper manner. So under the medical device regulation, there are some general obligations of the manufacturer. They must ensure that the devices are designed and manufactured in accordance with the regulation. That sounds just a lot like the US FDA requirement that you have to ensure that the devices are manufactured in accordance with the quality system regulation. You have to establish, execute, maintain, and document a system for risk management. So, of course, that's under the ISO 14971 standard. That's a very comprehensive life cycle standard. Conducting clinical evaluations, including post-market clinical follow-up, is a very, very strong and important part of the device, the new regulation. And there are some quite stringent requirements about producing clinical evaluation reports or doing clinical evaluation studies. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. And then preparing and updating technical documentation according to the regulation. I'm not going to go through this in detail. We have a short period of time here that we're on target, but are these slides made available to the attendees, Michael? Do the attendees receive a copy of these slides?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so you'll have the information. These are some things in here that I've put together for you to think about preparing for the transition, things that you have to get in place, gap assessments that are going to be needed. One of the things that I did want to point out here are there's some significant increased responsibilities on everyone. So manufacturers have a lot of new responsibilities, but a big one here is the authorized representatives. They're now going to be more legally responsible to ensure that the manufacturers that they represent are in compliance. So you're going to have contractual relationships with your authorized reps. They're going to have to understand what their legal requirements are. More requirements, more responsibilities on distributors as well. So several things to think about as you go through these slides and understand areas that you're going to need to put into place for that preparation to the medical device regulation. I've put here several gap assessments that you're going to want to think about taking and putting into place. A big one here is really about understanding the clinical requirements. What is clinical data? What is the gap between your current clinical evaluations that you have and what you're going to need to have under that regulation? Taking a look at your internal procedures for planning and putting your evaluations together. There has to be some analysis to existing products on the marketplace. So that's a lot like what the substantial equivalence discussion is in the US when you're doing a 510K. You've got to now show that your products are going to be equivalent to products that are already on the marketplace. And then performing a gap analysis to your post-market activities that you have currently and what's going to be required in the future. So moving a little bit now to the clinical evaluation issues, some of the background on that. As you know, when the last revision of the medical device directive came out, they were a lot more clear in that about what the requirements were for the clinical evaluation report. There is a lot more clarity now in the regulation and a lot more requirements. And then there's the MedDev guidance.
MedDev guidance, yeah.
So what, do you want to talk about that for a sec?
The MedDev guidance is now, it's only a guidance and you don't have to follow it, but it's better to follow it. And the new MDR, now you have to follow this new MedDev guidance. And the current version is version 4, and with the new MDR, I think they will change it to version 5 because they is now referred directly in this MDR. So,
and we all know that.
yes.
Question, will there be a great change?
No, I don't think so. It's only because in this current guidelines there is an old MDT referred, and now they want to change it to the MDR. We don't hope that there are big new requirements inside, because this still already requirements are very, very hard.
So you need to define the intended use, go through a risk management process, determine if clinical data is required. If not, justify that. Then you'll need to have a clinical evaluation that you go through and really pulling all of that information together. UL prepares these clinical evaluation reports for clients on a very regular basis. Over the last few years, how more intensive has that gotten?
Yeah, in the last half year, we have a lot of requests from our clients to update from Revision 3 to Revision 4, because it's really a big step. And there is a document from TÜV Süd coming out how to do this, or until when they have to do all the updates, and they must be done by December 2018.
So this is just a picture so that you can see sort of how all of the steps in a clinical evaluation will fit together. You have to take a look at, again, whether you've got to have investigations, whether a literature review will take care of it, pull those together if you need to have elements of both, and then your pre-market surveillance and your post-market activities. You'll notice that these slides that I've presented here are some that are courtesy of Dr. Dieter Danhorn. He's an expert in the clinical evaluation area. He's here in not here in Germany. This is Austria. Sometimes I forget where I am in the world. But yeah, he's in our German office of MDT.
Yeah.
Lot of information on these slides. Again, we won't have time to go into it, but I wanted to point out to you that there are several stages that need to be worked through to prepare the medical device or the clinical evaluation report. So the first is really scoping and planning. There is a planning requirement. Then you have to identify the data that you're going to include in the report when you put it together, appraisal of the data sets that you do gather up, and then take a look at whether that is going to put you in compliance with the new essential requirements in the regulation. So the essential requirements are also expanded. And of course, as you know, with your notified body and the technical file reviews, there's a pretty intensive review of your technical file and your essential requirements. And then reporting the results of the clinical evaluation report. So there's slides in here that show you the things that you need to consider at each one of these stages. Again, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but you'll have that to take a look at. I did want to see, Gunter, if you'd take just a moment to explain a little bit about how a typical clinical evaluation report is put together, and I'll turn this on.
Okay. Okay. What we normally need first is from you an instruction for use, because the clinical evaluation is mostly based off the indications and contraindications. Within your MedEv, you have to confirm every single indications with literature. And up to this, we also need risk management, usability, if available, if it's already market, your vigilance data or your PMS data, which is the best clinical data we can get. If you have any vigilance data or PMS data, we don't need any other clinical data, because these are data you have done with humans. And based on this, we start with a plan. And after you have reviewed this and we get a confirmation from you that we understood all of your product and you are okay with the way we are doing this, if it's a literature way or if it's with a dedicated device, then we can start with the report. And normally we need about 6 to 8 weeks for the preparing of this clinical evaluation.
Okay. Thank you. And so if anyone would like to get Dieter's not here, Gunter's business card, see him after. He has business cards he can give you. Okay, so the one thing that I think we've all heard about master control in the past is how dynamic the program is and how carefully Master Control is trying to keep up with the regulatory demands and have projects and systems in place that will help you. I've heard today, yesterday and today, several ways that there are ideas on how to keep track of documentation. The other one thing that you've heard from Gunter is how much data you have to gather together for a clinical evaluation report. And even if you outsource it to someone like UL, there's a lot of information that you are going to need to gather and store and keep track of and have in your systems. And so there's certainly a lot of ways that Master Control can help organize and keep that data in place. So my view on an electronic system is that it's really worth the price tag. The capability of storing your documents, knowing where they are, keeping your revisions up to date. As you comply with the medical device regulation, you're going to really have to have a lot more documents in place, a lot more plans in place. They're going to have to be updated on a regular basis. Your post-market information is going to have to be kept updated, and each one of those updates are going to take rev control. So I highly recommend really thinking strongly about how you can put those documents into a system such as Master Control. The information that I'm going to show you here now, you heard from Matt this morning about some of the processes that they're working on to help with the electronic batch record. I live just a couple of miles away from Master Control office in Salt Lake. So I've watched the company through the years. I've seen them grow. I've been amazed at how well they've done and things that they've put into place, and the way that they do business is just amazing. It's great. These slides are some sort of concept slides that they're also working on for putting some dossier information together. So they're working on a program. It should be released, I would think, sometime in the next year. But it gives you an idea of some ways that you could also use perhaps some programs in keeping track of the documents that you're going to need for the medical device regulation as well. You probably all know the front end and the information that it can provide for you. The idea that they have here for a registration checklist, dossier putting together, and from talking to the developer that's working on this, he's telling me that he's also planning to pull in information for the medical device regulation that will allow you to help keep up to speed with the documentation that you're going to have for that system as well. So benefits for MDR compliance: you'll be able to take advantage of form-to-form launching, offer the capability to track forms by the status, maintain active links so that your users will be able to review and see what events caused issues, or what how they merge into some other event that has to do with the medical device regulation and keeping up to speed with those requirements. Integrating with existing document repositories such as your ERP, your LMS, etc., without custom coding. And then integrate your forms with the training control. And again, what I saw today from Kevin Ash and some of the ideas there with the training processes, I think are going to be really great for companies as they go forward doing this transition planning, putting the gap analysis together, you could use that project area that Matt showed this morning and have your MDR set up in there as a project and assign out the responsibilities. There's some really exciting things that I've seen in this conference that if I were in a medical device manufacturer's shoes right now, I would be going, I want that. So I think that's about it. I have the conference survey thing here. I was supposed to remove some of these days here, but anyway, there you have it. And are there any questions? Yes.
The dossier, does that mean, which you showed, which will be realized within the next year or so, does that mean the technical file or the ECTD or the electronic submission?
The plan is to have it be applicable so that technical files can be put into there as well.
So also in ECTDs?
Yes, yeah, that's the plan. It's a year away, but that's the plan. So, okay. Anything else? All right, thank you.